Transitioning from classroom teaching to entrepreneurship. It's a really big shift, not only in the day-to-day schedule, but also in the numbers of roles and responsibilities. Now, don't get me wrong here. I know classroom teachers are fighting the good fight on a million different fronts. So that's not to say that they don't have a ton of roles. The point I'm less than fluidly trying to make is that it's just different. Classroom teaching can be overwhelming for a lot of reasons. And switching to self-employment and entrepreneurship can also be overwhelming, but for entirely different reasons. Which is why, when you're used to a career that already has demanded you pull long hours, work at home on the weekends, or contribute outside of the typical hours, it can be really hard to learn how to protect your time, how to actually charge your worth, and prioritize your own well-being for a change. Where do you even begin with all of that? On today's episode, Amy Roadman's story of opening a community studio on her own property shows us one possible route through this big change. Amy reveals how listening closely to student feedback about anything from class scheduling to glaze options transformed her teaching approach and business model, while helping her prevent burnout and even find more flexibility for her own making life. Her story reminds us that rapid growth and hundreds of thousands of internet followers isn't always necessary for success. Instead, perhaps the deliberate practice of slow growth can produce a business that sustains the life you actually want to have. And we'll get into all of that and more right after this message from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by The Community. With now over 100 makers from all over the world, The Community is where you can dive deeper into any topics we started talking about here on the podcast. Whether it's the debate back on episode 509 about choosing between Etsy or your own website, or trying to sort out what type of side hustle or full-time business works for your own personal life after hearing so many different stories here on the podcast. If you've been listening along and finding yourself wishing for more at the end of an episode, The Community is that more. Learn about more of the perks of membership by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. Or send me a message and I can put you in touch with one of our members to get an insider's perspective. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Cara. Hey, Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We just shift just like that. Someday, maybe the 5th year of podcasting, I'll come up with like a really smooth, I'll know exactly what I'm going to say first, but still don't. Not this point.
No, it's okay.
Well, before I get carried away, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to everybody listening.
Okay, I'll do my 30-second commercial because I belong to a women's business network group and we have to stand up and do that. So I'm Amy Roadman from Igniting Creativity, and I provide creative classes for children, host creative experiences for adults, and ignite creativity within classrooms.
That is such a good 30 seconds. We all need to practice this. Was there this was not what I expected to talk about at all, and we're going to get to the studio, but how did you even craft that? Because I absolutely do not have a 30-second pitch. Everybody knows I'm very long-winded.
Yeah, that's why we listen to you.
Is it though?
Well, you also provide good content, but...
Or it's also that everybody listening has mud all over their hands and they can't hit fast forward.
I mostly listen in the car, actually, so there we go. I belong to a local group where we meet every other Thursday, except not this month because, of course, snow happened on both of those weeks. But we do an annual retreat where it's, a full day thing where each of us comes with kind of a specialty to help each other out. And we spend the day working on our businesses, and somebody had us do a session where we crafted our 30-second commercial and had tips on how to kind of hook people in.
That's amazing. We all need to practice this. That's such a good
I have the notes. I'll have to share in the community.
Right? That will be fantastic. I'm sensing another next quarter masterclass theme approaching us here. But that's not what we're here to talk. What we were going to talk about is the fact that almost coming up on 2 years ago now, you started Ignite, which is a community studio, which I think a
Yes.
lot of people have dreams and aspirations of, and you started the darn thing. I'm excited to talk to you right now also in these early stages, right? Because it's a lot different 2 years in compared to 10, for example.
I hope so. I hope it grows even more.
You're like, "Dear God, please."
Yeah, because it's still a part-time gig, but I've been a classroom teacher forever. We just cover lots of gray. I won't say how long. But it was one of those things where I left my public school job 5 years ago, and I actually left it to do residency programs. There's a statewide program that one of our local museums kind of covers our region, and so I go into schools still, but I'm not like the primary teacher. Other teachers host me, and I, was still being a teacher, but again, on a part-time level. And so I was trying to fill in my salary with other things. Unfortunately, 1.5 residencies in is when the world shut down. And so I had to figure out what to do really quickly. And I was teaching some pottery classes at a different studio. I started teaching virtually, and I still do that, but on a much smaller scale because I missed having my own classroom. And we had the space. I teach pottery classes, like our studio is on our property on a separate building right outside. I have my commute is across the yard instead of 37 miles to that public school that I taught in. So, yeah, it's just been a journey where I literally started from scratch, but I've had to kind of like start classrooms before. So it just made sense.
That is definitely a skill that feels very transferable, which is interesting because I was just talking to a bunch of, not a bunch, but a lot of my close friends are educators and they're thinking about changing and they're like, I don't know what else to even consider, what else to even look for, or how else to write a resume. And I'm like, what do you mean? You have so many freaking skills. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, when I left, so many were like, "I just feel trapped. I don't know what else I would do. My degree's in education. I don't know what else I can do." And I'm like, so many things. And you actually met one of my friends at NCECA that left classroom teaching. She was an art teacher as well. And she's now a scheduler for the deaf community. And she's learning sign language herself and just completely jumped out of the field of education. So they love teachers, they said, because it's like we know how to put out fires and kind of just do a lot of things at once.
Well, and project management is the immediate thing I think of like in terms of your ability to like build a curriculum that applies across so many different things. But, this will just be the all teacher love episode for everybody.
Another teacher that left, another art teacher as well, she said, "We were event planners, but we never got to, like, revel in the success of it because it was, like, 2 minutes later, we had another class walking in, and it was just, like, moving on." Where now, like, even in the studio, each class we get to kind of reflect and see what worked, what didn't work, what are we changing for the next time, and we actually had time for that. Not that
Mm.
teachers don't do that, but they don't have the time that we have now.
Yeah, they're doing it on their weekends instead of on paid
Yeah,
time.
as part of their workday.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I also just thought about the huge difference, I'm sure, but want to hear it from you in terms of when you see something you want to change or do something different, like you can do that and not get the sign off of like, does this fit whatever statewide curriculum? Then I have to check these boxes and blah, blah, blah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I get to just do what I want, and I take a lot of suggestions from my other teachers or the studio members constantly. Like, one of the things that I definitely could say that has happened over the 2 years is we've progressed into what we are because of what students have either requested or we're seeing what works and what doesn't work. One of the most popular sessions is an every other week session where I was doing it weekly, and somebody right at the beginning who had a child couldn't just commit weekly but wanted to try it out and said, "Would you consider letting me come every other week?" And now we have biweekly classes. It works for a lot of people's schedules, and we rely heavily on damp boxes because of that, but it's great. And we have open studio hours in between, so if they have the time at an off class time, they can come in, but a lot of them don't. It's just we see them twice a month.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you don't think of pottery as the thing that you could only pop in twice a month unless you're trying to, get stuff dry enough on the same day you throw it to trim it. And,
Yeah, that's impossible.
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we talked about, you mentioned that the studio's on your property. So where in the world are you? And were you there before you started the studio? Or did you guys move there in part because of this?
No, we've been here for 10 years. So what happened is we've always lived within like a 4-mile radius of where both of us grew up. My husband and I have known each other since 4th grade. And then we
That's
started dating right
adorable.
out of high school and we moved just a few miles away. When we were looking for another house, I worked so far away. We knew in order to stay in this school district, we couldn't go too far. And we ended up finding this house that needed fully remodeled and it had almost 9 acres. And my husband was in the process of like starting his own business. He needed more space than what we had at the old house, too. And so he was working out of our basement garage until he wanted to expand and have an employee and didn't want them just in our house. The machines he needed, because he has CNC machines and does like robotics, we built like a pole building on our property. So I took over part of his building. So we actually share it and people have to walk through his side. So the first time they're here, sometimes it's a little confusing. There's a sign, but they're like, "Am I in the right place?" And I have to yell from the other side when I hear the door, "Come on in, like, I'm coming. You're in the right place."
Keep coming, keep coming, keep
Yeah.
coming.
And he has 2 employees, and they're just used to people being in and out, and they're used to seeing people bring their dogs and kind of visit them, and that's about it, like, it's just everybody's used to the fact that this is a 2 business space, and it's unrelated, but it has been very helpful actually being with him because I use his tools. Sometimes I need the strength of his employees, like, whenever my clay is delivered, they load it onto my shelves and unpack for me, so, yeah, it's good.
Nice. That was a unplanned clutch move right there for a clay
Mhm,
delivery. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. And so you said CNC. Is he a woodworker, contractor? I forget.
He does robotic things, automation, they are milling metals and plastics and things to turn into machines that do other stuff. It's very hard to explain, but
Okay.
there's yeah, we're kind of in a manufacturing area in southwestern Pennsylvania, and he works for companies that do plastic injection molded medical parts. And then the machines he's creating, like, tests them for quality control or sorts them as they come out of the molds and all kinds of stuff that when you look at them, you don't know what he's making or doing.
Got it. Got it. But is it such a great reminder of like how people can build their own thing tangential to another industry, right? Like people can probably envision robotics on a factory line, but I would have
Mhm.
never known like, oh, you actually need all of these other steps before you get to the robot that's on the factory line. So,
Yeah, yeah, like, he's designing and building everything from, conception, and he built us a slab roller, and this is my gentle reminder that it's not done yet, but
I'll conveniently clip this part of the audio and
thank you,
what
yes.
email do I need?
So, whenever I said I found the slab roller on Facebook Marketplace, he's looking at it and he's like, "Well, I could just build that." So, we have a slab roller sitting on his side of the business, and it is going to be automated where you press a button and it will make it the slab, like, thickness that you want. Well, there's different settings. It's just not 100% done yet.
So we're bringing your husband to NCECA next year. We'll give him a year. He's got 13 months. All right. I'm like, this could be huge. I'm just saying.
Well, it could be really awesome, but it would also be really expensive.
Well, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We clay people don't like that.
Mm-mm. No.
Oh, but yeah. Robotics and clay, I guess, don't exactly match up in terms of our economic investment, perhaps.
I would say so, yeah, but he does really cool stuff. My Christmas gift was I wanted one of those clamps where you can put your piece of pottery on the clamp as you're painting and designing it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So just to describe if people haven't seen this, it like goes on the edge of a wall and then you can put a mug or a vessel or not
Mhm.
a wall, sorry, a table. And then it's like on essentially you're putting a cylinder on a cylinder, right? You're like and then
Right.
it's there and
Yeah.
okay, yep. Yep.
Like, it has little teeth basically so that you can slide it over and then tighten it just enough so that it holds it,
Mhm.
so that you're not having to hold it while you are
Mhm.
adding surface decoration. So I wanted one of those, and he found something, some sort of machine that he altered, and now that's also automated, and it sits in my living room, and I sit on the couch with an extension cord, and I bring my pots in, and I underglaze them that way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, just in case anybody missed it, both of you now are self-employed at this point.
Yes.
As of 2 years ago, or as do you count it more like 5 years with the
Yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago was our scramble to figure out health insurance because I was our health insurance once he quit his job and, like, everything was steady before it was kind of like go time and we could say, "Okay, it's time that I can leave that job." Because I stayed for 4 years longer than I really wanted to for health insurance, and
Yeah.
we know how you feel about that.
And that's a decision plenty of other people are doing the exact same thing
Mhm.
in the US of A. So he started his company then almost like 10 years ago-ish for him?
2015, yeah, 10
Okay,
years ago.
cool. Wow,
Mhm.
craziness.
Yeah, and mine started 5 years ago in a way because I became, like, an independent contractor, but,
Right.
studio-wise, that was 2 years ago.
Years ago. So what was the impetus for going from because I imagine like the contract teaching could have filled up your time really quickly and then you come home and make your own stuff and sell your own stuff. So what was the impetus for the undertaking of starting your own studio?
I guess well, I didn't have my own kiln or wheel or anything, I was working at a different studio, and I saw the need for the community, I missed having my own classroom. It's hard to share a space, and I was sharing spaces with everyone, whether I was in a school or at this studio, no place was mine anymore, and I was ready to buy a kiln for myself. It was just time, to buy a kiln, get a wheel, so that I didn't have to go somewhere else to use it, and when my husband was like, "Well, you can have the other section of the building, like, I have the smaller section, it's not a big studio," but he was willing to give it up. It was basically his storage space, and he had a little machine over there, so I started cleaning it out and had to get up on scaffolding and scrub the ceiling and the walls and everything, and I am very afraid of heights, so that was a nerve-wracking month, but because somebody used to share his space and weld over there, so it was very dirty.
Oh, okay.
But it was just kinda like putting this plan into action and seeing where I wanted to take it, and the goals and ideas of the other studio weren't quite the same as mine, and I wanted to be on my own again. So it was perfect. It was just perfect timing. He's been supportive with it, like, anything I wanted to do, just go for it. In fact, yesterday, he's like we were discussing shelving and the need for more, and he's like, "Well,
Always.
you can just take over my side and have the whole building and just make this bigger," Just retire him right now.
Why do I feel like that's sneakily his way of getting to build a different purpose-built building for himself?
I don't know that we'll have another building. I think he's just wanting to phase out of his own business and let me take over.
It's hilarious. He's like, "Well, if you really need the space."
Right, we do need the space, and we've discussed expanding at least to build a room on the back for the kiln and his compressor so that it's not as noisy in there and that we have that separate space so the studio doesn't get as hot and so that we can have more shelving.
Yep, that makes sense. What is your current capacity right now?
Well, I was kind of adding things up because our shelves are full now, but our classes aren't 100% full. And for the amount of classes we'd like to offer, we have to either kind of reinvent how we use the shelf space or figure out where we can put more. But we're running classes like almost every day and sometimes twice a day, but they're small. We have 5 wheels. So if it's a one-time class, it's me and 4 students so that I can demo with them the entire time and go step by step with everybody. But our regular, like, weekly and biweekly classes are 5 students. And then I have another teacher that does hand building classes, and those we figured like 6 people, 8 tops, because there's not enough room. It just would get too crowded for my comfort level. I know other studios cram a lot more people into them, and it was funny because over it was last fall or spring. It was in the spring. They did a pottery tour in Pittsburgh, and there's a studio there that, like, their classes fill up immediately. They have 18 wheels or something like that, and it's not that much bigger of a space than ours. And I came back and was talking to one of our studio members. I'm like, I would be claustrophobic in there. They only have one table. They don't have space to spread. And she's like, Amy, they're probably used to that. They're in the city. We're in the country. We need that space. We're used to having neighbors that are, you could see them, but you're not talking at the mailbox.
You know the house is there.
So, we're used to having that room. And so I think that we all have a different comfort level because we're not city people.
Yeah, that's super interesting because it's also where my brain immediately went as you were saying that was understanding who your audience is, right? Like we talk about this a lot with selling pots, but also with something like offering classes. Would you put off a lot of your regulars or the people who have come to you at this point if you started to make a studio this layout the same way as the city does? Maybe not. Who knows? Because new students, that's the only thing that they would know. But yeah, that's a totally, totally fair point. I use cabinet space dramatically different after living in a city for my entire adult life compared to, how my grandma's cabinets look at the farm because she's just got a bigger kitchen. She's got more space.
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of like getting a good flow in the studio, and it's a small enough space. It doesn't, we've rearranged a few times, and just trying to maximize our space without overcrowding it. But we all spread also. As soon as somebody is sitting at the table, they instantly kind of take over the next person's spot if they're not there, and we're not at tables a lot if we're at the wheel, but there's days where they're glazing. Everybody's doing different things. We're not one of those classes where it's 6 weeks and today we're doing this, next week we're doing that. We kind of progress on an individual basis. So it's kind of a rolling admission.
I'm so curious about how you manage that as a teacher.
Well, what I realized is whenever I was teaching 6-week courses, the very first day we're really focusing on centering and just the very basics. But by week 2, everybody's already at a different level. Some people pick up centering so much faster than others. By the time we're on week 4 or 5, sometimes people are ready for lids or, they're making things where they're attaching handles and different stuff, and others are not ready for that yet. So it just already was at such a different, like everyone was progressing differently that I don't want to stop people at the end of 6 weeks. I had a girl look up at me at the last week and just go, what am I going to do with my Thursdays now? Because the next class was already full. There wasn't another session for her to sign up for. And I don't want to be turning away people when this has become such a hobby for them. They're not there just to try something out and like move on. They build ideas. They've got ideas for years. They want to continue this as their hobby. So I'm not going to stop them. So, we do have a class where there's people that have been in it since the very beginning and others that just joined a couple months ago. But it's really nice because they learn from each other.
I imagine, too, that at least my experience with community studios, it's not only a hobby, but you also then have your social network.
Oh my goodness, so much. Yeah. It has turned into like a spin-off of, okay, we're all here because we have this love of clay or we wanted to try something new or we had a job that was stressful and we just needed time to like kind of decompress. And then it has become where there's basically a book club. People are exchanging books or convincing others, oh, you need to read this too, and trying it out. Like I'm on book 3 of a series I never thought I'd read. Sourdough, one person shared their sourdough starter and now it's like running rampant.
Is anybody growing lavender yet?
No, actually.
Wait for it.
And we do have someone who grows flowers in general.
There is some version of gardening happening, I am sure.
Oh, gardening is another big one. Yeah, for sure. And it's so great because everybody shares stuff. Like I'll never look at a bagel from the store the same again. Those sourdough bagels are so good. So we also kind of have a bartering system going on. And yeah, I traded something for batches of bagels. And I used to trade duck and chicken eggs for flowers or jellies or whatever. Yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
I love that so
Yeah.
much. To me, this is like the thing we've forgotten about the importance of shared spaces, whether they're online, like, I'm trying to create, or in person, which is also still crucial for all of us wherever we live. Of like, I think this is, at least for me, this is how we were meant to be. This is like the difference
Mhm.
of being human as opposed to, I don't know, not. I don't have a comparison.
I am very thankful that I get to walk across my yard instead of drive 37 miles down an interstate now, but at the same time, I would be very lonely if I was working from home by myself. And everybody's such a support system, And when you said about gardening, I thought about how somebody brought in tomato and pepper plants to share because they had too many and they just sat at the studio until they were all gone. Whoever wanted them took them. But it is, and I know it could be a lot more, but we've also wanted to grow really slowly and kind of progress. When I opened, it was March 1st, 2023,
Mm.
and it was 1 day a week. And then as that class filled up, I added another class, and we're just kind of gradually watching the slow progression of it grow. We have kids classes now because we had a member who asked if I was planning on offering it. She's like, "My daughter would love it." And I said, "I'm already in schools a lot. This is kind of like my safe haven. I love the adult classes." She's like, "Well, I'll teach them if you don't mind." And I totally trust her to do that. And they've been amazing. Like, kids love them. So she's doing one Saturday a month. And, it was just because she had a question about it. And is it a possibility? And we made it happen. So,
That's amazing. That's got to also give your members a sense of ownership, or, it's just a different level of participation to be able to come to somebody with an idea and then say, okay, yeah, if you want to take that on, tell me how you're going to do it. Like, that's awesome. And also smart of you, just the ownership for your members of being able to come to you and saying, hey, I have this idea, can we give it a shot? Or you as an owner giving them the ownership to like run with an idea, because otherwise I could see yourself running yourself ragged really quickly trying to implement, even five people's ideas, as you as one person trying to implement five times the amount of ideas,
yeah.
be worried about your sleep.
Well, I can't do it all for sure. And I like have a suggestion box paper up there, and we talk about like what did they accomplish last year? What do they want to accomplish this year? So that's helpful, just kind of knowing where people want to go with their ideas and their skills. And also, I'm a teacher by trade. Like, that's what I went to school for, is art education. And I feel it's really important to have the knowledge and the background information and like kind of know where each person wants to go with their, differentiated learning. And so that's important, but I also want my instructors to have experience. So both of my other instructors have tons of experience. Both have art degrees. It's not like I'm saying, okay, well, you've been at the studio for 6 months and you're ready to teach just because you really love what you're doing and you're excited about it. But if somebody that is new has an idea, we're going to figure out how to implement it or figure out how to share their idea somehow, or, but I also want to stress that we care about that good education that we're trying to provide.
I think that's a huge differentiator. And it's not, I'm trying to think of how I can say what I'm about to say without getting canceled. Because this comes from a place of love. I know that we all love clay so much, but I also know that if I tried to teach photography 2 years in, my knowledge set, I could have taught one particular thing, maybe I
Mhm.
could have taught how to take a headshot. Not even, actually, no, I don't know. I could have, my brain just immediately went to all the lighting complexities, but there's just not that I don't know that we can't put a time on like, oh, you have to have done something for X amount of time, because that's
Exactly. Yeah.
random. But it's more like there's a huge difference in something that you feel like. At this point for me, I only started teaching because I got to the point where I felt I knew that I could walk into any room and take a good photo, regardless of what was presented to me. Whereas 2 years in, I was praying for an overcast day on a wedding day, or like, I needed a certain list of things in order to take a good photo. Whereas like now it's kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever.
It's second nature, or you could answer anybody's question,
Right.
or, yeah. So,
Or like stylistically, I can help somebody do something even if it's not my style. And the same with clay. If you practice one form over and over again, you can probably teach that one form within a year, but maybe you don't know how to help somebody who's left-handed if you're right-handed or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Whenever I'm explaining things, I'm very careful to say, use your dominant hand. And, like I'm having to show them. And I've had to learn how to center clay as a lefty instead of a righty.
Mm.
And, it's difficult. And I'll say this very lovingly. We call those who jump in and immediately start giving advice or kind of want to take over as a teacher, or in some cases, I know who have started teaching way earlier than what we're saying you maybe are skilled to as the master potters. They've definitely got the confidence. And I'm not saying I haven't ever taught a subject that I knew everything about. I was the only art teacher in the district, which meant I was teaching K through 12 and tried to provide as much variety as possible. But I was honest with the students. If they wanted to try something I never did, I was like, "Okay, we'll experiment together. I'm not the expert in this." And, one of the students I remember was like, "Oh, Mrs. Roadman, you can do anything because you just are willing to try," And so that's the same here. I want people to try. I want people to give it a go. If it's an idea that I'm not sure if it's gonna work, we're gonna figure it out together, and if it's a fail, okay, so it's clay and it goes in the reclaim. It's not the end of the world. It was probably a really good learning experience.
Is there something then that I don't want to say rubric because I don't know that it's that formulaic, but is there something that you either look for or a certain amount of skills? Because I do know so many people are passionate about clay. They touch it, they want it to be
Mhm.
their life. And the demand is so high there for teaching that there's also plenty of studios that are like, oh my God, you're willing to teach and also teach for like $12 an hour, which, spoiler, no, thank you.
That has happened before, yeah.
Which is like, again, I get the person who's passionate enough to want to teach is so excited. And the studio who's just trying to keep their doors open and that's all that they can provide for teaching is also trying to do their best. So everybody's trying to do their best. But is there something that you're kind of using as a means to help figure out, like, is this person ready to teach that either other studios could consider, or maybe somebody who's thinking about teaching themselves can be like, oh, okay, this is what I want to work on so I can be ready.
I think it's a balance of, can you explain it and demonstrate it really well so that that translates into somebody else being able to do what you're talking about? Because especially if you're on the wheel, everybody holds their body differently. Everybody is more comfortable doing one thing versus another. And you have to figure that out. And it's not always really obvious. Like, I'll look at somebody and like, your form looks good, but it's just not happening. So let me feel your clay. Let me figure out like, where is your twist or lump or, what's happening here. And it took time and experience to know how to help each individual. So that's a balance of that, also having that skill level and just being able to explain things, the technical aspects of clay and run all the equipment. I've been running kilns for 25 years. Everything's a little different. I did low fire clay in schools, but we're doing mid fire here. Glazes are going to have different effects, and we just have to test. And it's a lot of experimentation, and you have to be willing to put the time in to do that so that you can say to a student, I know that this glaze combo is going to do this, but they apply it a little heavier or lighter and then it runs. And, we hope there's a cookie under it because I expected that it may run. There's just so many things to predict and it doesn't always go how you expect it to go. But it's really having the confidence that you are able to help somebody, that they can come to you with whatever question. And if you don't know it, you're willing to figure it out with them.
Yeah. Where my brain goes, interestingly enough, is like, how many times have I had to troubleshoot something? Right?
Hmm.
Because I think we've all been at the stage of like when the clay is, let's call it behaving, when we're having a good day, we feel like, oh my gosh, my skills have progressed so much. I'm so much better. I am totally ready to like teach somebody else. We're good to go. And then you come in that next day, right?
We've all done that.
Right? Or like you try to throw with a different clay than you're used to or something like that. And I think for even the true master crafts people, let's call them instead of a master potter, there still is some learning curve of using a new material, but their ability to actually use it is so much faster they understand the material on such a deeper level, and I mean, this is especially true with clay of all mediums. The levels in which we can understand this thing is just mind-boggling. I think that's why there's so many people who just never ever stop because you're always learning something new.
Yeah, the ideas are endless, and we feed off of each other too. Like, someone will have an idea, and I wouldn't say they're being copied, but this fall, there were a lot of ghosts, and there were a lot of Christmas trees in the winter because it was a new skill for people to throw that closed form, and we made a lot of lamps, and everybody's was completely different, and whenever something flops, it's like, okay, well, what can it turn into? Somebody turned a tree into the coolest Harry Potter sorting hat for her son for his birthday. And she's like making him a whole bookshelf and filling it up with books, and that's going to be a decoration on it. But it was a tree that twisted, and then that just kind of takes one idea down a different road. So that's really cool seeing everybody like feed off of each other, and it's never a direct copy. Everybody has their own style. I can pull things out of the kiln and I know whose is whose without looking at it most of the time, without looking at their maker's mark. But it's just so fun watching everybody grow together. And one student had the suggestion of a bingo card. Like, what do we want to do this year? And let's put it on a bingo card so we can cross it off. And whoever gets bingo, like, they're going to get a prize of some sort. And it's been really fun. Everybody looks at each other's cards like, oh, that's really cool. Maybe I'll try that too. And it's not always like, I'm going to make this. One of mine that I crossed off first thing was I made a fountain for our cats. Sometimes it's more just, let's start documenting our glaze combos better. Or, I'm going to clean up and clean off my shelf more often. So just having that goal of what do they feel like they need to work on?
I just thought back to you talking about running out of shelf space. I'm like, that might be like a studio bingo square where everyone's required to. That's that solves your shelf problem right there.
So, yeah, they have individual shelf space right now instead of like our Monday class has a collective shelf, and it might have to move to something like that. I'm not sure how we'll work that because I don't want to limit how many people can come because, oh, we need 2 more shelves. We'll figure it out.
Totally. Well, actually, that leads to a question I had for you just in terms of so you had the background teaching knowledge and experience in terms of guiding a group of people. But what about when it comes to just the pragmatic, like setting up a community studio and kind of the business model of because I was surprised to realize how quickly you had other teachers with you. 2 years is a long time and a short time to have
Mhm.
started a thing. And so then to already bring on other people, that's a lot. You've done a lot in 2 years.
Well, I knew these other teachers well and was very confident in their ability because that's something like I know I have a good network of art teachers around, and these aren't people that taught in schools, but they've taught before, and like non-credit courses and others and in other studios. But it's a small area, even though it's a very spread out area around us because we're a rural. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Laurel Highlands, but it's kind of a touristy area that we all live 15 minutes away from town. But actually, one of them pointed out, they're like, if you build it, they will come. People are coming to the middle of nowhere for this. My husband, that was one of his concerns whenever I said I wanted to do it here and I'm not going to have a studio in town. He's like, are people going to want to drive here? And my response was, nobody is like casually window shopping or going out to lunch and then saying, oh, I see that a pottery class is happening. Let's jump in right now. Like we're signing up for a very specific activity. So they are coming for a purpose. And so that hasn't been a problem. And I have people that actually come from the city to the studio. They drive over an hour. One brought another friend. It's amazing because they love the space. They love the people. We love them. They did take a break for the winter because we have back roads. And
They just saw the writing on the wall. Like they were like, yeah, this isn't going to work.
like, can we pause because it's an ongoing subscription type of payment. Instead of paying for 6 weeks at a time or 8 weeks at a time, it's like automatically deducted every week or every 2 weeks, whatever schedule they're on. And if they're not able to come and they give us that notice, we're able to pause their payments and, it makes sense for them.
That's interesting. That's like a completely different model than I feel like I'm used to hearing. Even when
Mhm.
I've been in like what's been called an independent study or a membership. It's still been pay for a certain amount of time and you're just not
Mhm.
taking a class. You're here to have the space, the resources to keep making your stuff, but it's still a chunk of, 6 week, 8 weeks, whatever. So
Yeah.
how did you get that idea? Was that from somewhere else or?
Yeah. So when you talk about like the business model of things, like number one, you want to get new students in. So you have this like funnel, whenever we're talking business talk, there's like a funnel to kind of get them in and then they want to then stay or progress to different levels. So I have one-time classes where they can come and just, make a hand-built project that's very specific in, or they can kind of try it out like a date night or a girls' night out, or we've had like families bring people for birthdays where it's just a 2.5 hour try out the wheel. They get a couple pieces. They're going to be little wonky pots, but it's a lot of fun. They pick their colors and then I dip glaze them, so their fee is for that one chunk of time and then they pick up their pots once they've been fired. But then after that, if they want to continue, they can stay for 2 weeks or they can stay for 2 years. Like there's no limit, but then they're not having to pay a really big chunk of money at a time. So when I started teaching the virtual classes throughout the pandemic, that was the model. There were one-time classes, there were multi-week classes where you could set it for a certain amount of weeks, or it could just be kind of an ongoing thing. And that's what I was most successful with. So I was teaching, drawing and painting and air dry clay over the screen. And I would have the general group of students that stuck with me, and then some that just kind of ebb and flowed and like came in and came out. And that meant I almost always had a full class. Like I wasn't having to wait till the end of 8 weeks to have a new registration period. And I've had the same students every Tuesday afternoon. I still teach kids from 4 years ago that are homeschooled, and I love them. We've gotten to know each other so well. We can customize those classes as well. So when I saw that that was the model that worked so well to kind of keep people long term, and once they're into it, they don't feel like they have to stop or they have to compete with other people to get back into class. I want them to feel like they're part of that community. That was such a big part of it. In my 30-second commercial, hosting creative experiences for adults. It's so much about the experience that's where we're trying to go for that vibe. We're protecting our peace. This is a place you want to come, that you kind of have ownership of it.
I also feel like it gets rid of that frantic, I have to set my alarm because the day that these classes open, I need to be at a fast internet connection so that I can log in and sign up. Like, because I know the first time it took me a few months to get into my first community studio ever because the way they managed it with existing students was once you were an existing student, you had access to sign up, to re-sign up for the next session before anybody else. So that did give you, the opportunity to stick around and not have to like have so much competition. But that also meant that as an outsider trying to come in, there were times where there wasn't an option because it was already sold out by the time it was supposed to be open to the public, quote unquote.
Mhm.
And so you really did have to like, okay, these classes are going to go open at midnight on this day. I'm going to stay up and sign up. Like, I feel like I have friends that do this with like Soul Cycle classes or something like that.
Yeah.
They want their specific bike at the specific time, whatever. Which is a great problem to have, that means you're in high demand and that's wonderful, but it also can be jolting against the type of, like you're saying, the type of vibe and experience you're trying to give someone. So that it's really interesting to think about this rolling schedule.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, my Monday and Wednesday classes are full, so that is, if somebody drops out, then there'd be an opening for that, but we still have a Thursday night or daytime classes that are still available. We have a lot of people that throughout these 2 years have bought wheels on their own, but they still come not just for open studio, because we also have an open studio membership as well, like for those independent potters that don't feel like they need that dedicated instructional time. But most of them that bought wheels still come to the classes. Like they're still here to learn and, they practice at home, but they don't feel like they know enough. It's great because they've all just, like you said, formed that friendship. And, each class has a different dynamic. They're all fun. And they're all like some classes have like different generations in them. We have teenagers that have come, and one of them, she had signed up for a class at a different studio, but they have an age limit. And when they found out she was younger, like a year and a half younger than that age limit, she wasn't able to sign up yet. So her mom called me and said, like, are you willing to give her a chance? And I said, she's a little younger than what I have on the website as the age limit, but let's do one class as a trial. Oh my gosh, my Wednesday people love her to death. She was sick this week and didn't get to come. And they're like, where is she? And her bingo card has such cool ideas on it. And they're like, we love everything she brings to class as well, and we have grandmothers and retired ladies that are in there with younger people, or I don't know. There's, like you said, about attracting different audiences. We have the retired ladies, we have business kind of professional people that don't have kids yet, but have the time or the money to do it. We have younger people. And then there's a lot of people that are like at my stage of life where they're kind of on that verge or right after empty nest syndrome, and they have time, they need to do something with themselves, and they can actually invest in themselves instead of their kids again. Because I wouldn't have opened this 5 years ago. My kids were still in middle school, high school, and like busy. And now I get to do what I want to do. And I was, my schedule, I can work in the evenings and have daytime hours off instead because I'm not dictated around sports schedules or their activities.
There's really no easy place to pause a conversation because, in reality, I hadn't actually realized how long Amy and I had chatted when we originally sat down. So, forgive the abrupt stop, or rather pause. If you'd love a sneak peek as to where this has all taken Amy and can't possibly wait until next week, then be sure to check her out over at amy.roadman.art on Instagram. And of course, if you're enjoying this chat, then share it online and tag Amy at that same account, as well as me at The Maker's Playbook, so we can connect online and say thank you. While this chat with Amy wasn't intended to be about the community, Amy is indeed one of our longtime members, so you can always come check out my personal favorite place on the internet, free of social media trolls, and get more of your community studio building questions answered directly from Amy by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. Community membership directly supports the creation of this very podcast. So until part 2, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzvan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.